Okay, Rowan, thank you for agreeing to come on Mind Talks.
Thank
And
you, Ian, for calling me.
always nice to talk to you, Rowan. Always nice to talk to you. Just to give a background for those of our listeners who are not aware of what is Mind Talks. Mind Talks is a series of interviews that I do, video interviews, ideally on like this, on a Zoom kind of setting, where we get into the mind of a leader or a successful person. So this is to get into the mind of leaders and successful people. In your case, of course, again, both these attributes apply. You've been successful and you've been a great leader. So there are two reasons why I want to talk to you, Rowan. So that's the just the general setup for this session. Is that okay with you?
Yeah, definitely, and I'm always excited to talk with you. I think you definitely give a different perspective, which helps us to grow as a leader and to be more successful. So thank you for inviting me.
Oh, it's going to be awesome. I'm looking forward to this, Rowan, because I know how much you have inside of you, and I want to pull some of that outside so that other leaders can, learn and grow from it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I would be definitely delighted to share my experience with you, through which we can share to the outside folks.
Wonderful. Now, Rowan, if you don't mind, in your own words, who is Rowan? What was his journey like? What were the transition points in his life? Something like that, if you don't mind sharing, our listeners would like to know more.
Oh yeah, definitely. So I'm a Bangalore boy, for all practical purposes. Parents originally from Kerala, so but a Bangalore boy still, like grew up in center of Bangalore, love Bangalore all the while. I've had my stints outside India, but I think the pull towards India was probably a lot more, and to see and to make an impact here. I started my journey when the software wave, or I would say the boom in India, was just getting started in the mid '90s.
Mm-hmm.
Out of college, and um, worked with worked with a few startups initially, which was very unusual those days,
Right.
because the general tendency was to work with more established companies.
Yes.
And I also spent a few years outside India,
Mm-hmm.
gaining a lot of valuable experience both in Europe and in US, and both in the startup world and in the better established worlds. And going along, I then switched gears to much larger companies after having had a very good foundation in the startups. And the biggest thing that I would like to do in my career or in my personal life is to make impact on people. So the impact on people is what results in finally an impact to the company, or
Right.
impact to your revenues, or impact to your margins.
Right.
Because I would call myself as a people enabler, someone who would like to see people bloom to their full potential, and I think the rest will just take care of by itself. So that's what I think has led to the small successes that I've had, and that's also, I think, has resulted in me being able to make an impact to wherever I've worked or people who have come across. I believe largely in a positive way.
Awesome. Very nice. Thank you so much, Rowan. A little bit about the personal side, if you don't mind bringing in one or two points. Marriage,
Yeah,
how many times, how many children, those kind of things.
yeah. Married once, okay, and I have two kids. My elder one, my son, he is 16 years old, doing his 11th, and my daughter, who's in sixth now, she is 11 years old, and we have a great time as a family. Like I sharing very interesting perspectives. Yes, a lot of learnings from my kids, definitely, and overall it's been a great journey together. And as I told you, I've been a Bangalore boy, grew up in Bangalore, so that's a part of me, like, and a lot of my friends circles and everybody are around here. So
Excellent. School, college, where did you go, Rowan?
so I did my schooling in St. Joseph's Boys High School, like Ian. I mean, so that I think was an absolute foundation. I think which which I think really propelled me to where I am today. I would definitely give huge credit to the school for having grounded me, along with, like, various other people who influenced me as parents have been a huge influence on my life. Growing up in my career, my kids have taught me a lot. My wife has taught me a lot. But school has been a big grounding, I would say, going ahead. And whether it in both my personality, in like questioning the status quo, in the friend circles which I had, I think a lot of it just helped me as I went ahead. I did my engineering in computer science from Gaussian College of Engineering in Bangalore.
Okay.
So yeah, so that's with respect to my education. But I think a lot of my education along the way post that has been on the job and through various people and experiences where I've learned immensely. So I would say the next biggest chunk was my experience in startups,
Right.
which gave me a real, I would say, a jet propulsion kind of thing to learn various things.
Wonderful. Can you give us one of those things that you learned as in the startup ecosystem, kind of that really made you a good leader? One of the things, if you
Yes,
don't.
yes. So I think the biggest thing which made me what I am today is really through the startups where the word can't do, or like the word that let me just go and try was really not existing. I mean, it was a do or die. You have to do it. The option called failure was just a stepping stone to next success. It was not really failure. I mean, it was always seen as, okay, let me try, go on to the next stepping stone to the next success, which is really, like, so that continuous passion to get there. And as a result of which, what really happens there is you get your hands dirty in everything. I think
Mhm.
that grounding really helps you. Say there was nothing like, okay, now I'm an engineer, I'm a developer, so this is what I'm going to do.
Right.
Correct. You get yourself molded into owning completely what you do,
Right.
including your interactions with your stakeholders outside India, in India. There are people to help you, obviously, but like when I started, all of us were in the learning phase together,
Right.
right? So what it really pushes you in is it makes you a solution finder rather than just someone who just finds a problem. And
Right.
to find that solution, what happens is it really ensures that you explore yourself. There are a lot of hidden capabilities within you which you don't know. So
Right.
that exploring yourself is what results in you solving problems
Hmm.
by stretching boundaries, which otherwise, like to someone working in a highly structured environment, you wouldn't get even opportunities to do that because you just finish your work and you're done, right? I
Right.
mean, so you need to put that much of extra effort to explore, which I didn't have to do because as part of my day-to-day job, I had to explore everything, right? So
Excellent. So, while the normal world looks at you go into a big company like an MNC, get all your foundation sorted there, and then you can try entrepreneurship because the foundation is really, really good.
yeah.
But this is the opposite way around. You're saying it worked for you.
Yes, for me the foundation was built there, and what I do now in larger companies, which are the Fortune 500 companies, or what I do here, is not based on that part, which is what I think in today's world you need. Today's world is moving at an extremely fast pace.
Right.
You can't take earlier, if you could say, like you could take a few months to decide on a strategy. Now strategy is literally what you eat for breakfast and for dinner and for lunch, right? You have to keep on change. I mean, you have to keep on. It's not like you make a strategy and then decide, okay, let me go implementing it. You're doing it, implementing it. You're doing it, implementing it. That's what you do in a startup. So I think um, during the early part of your career, I mean, the sooner you do it, you can even do it in your younger age schools where
Right.
you just try out different things. The fear of failure has to go away from your, from your mind completely. And once the fear of failure goes away, it's not being brash. It is being you start getting more. I think your ability to discern and understand, okay, what and see, okay, this is what really is going to work gets better and better as you gain years of experience. There'll be many folks who ask me, how do you know that this will work?
Mhm.
Or how did you know this would work?
Right.
I mean, there are sometimes which I can really explain, sometimes which I just can't explain. It is
Right.
just that something in you telling
You get
yes,
that feel. Yeah.
you get that feeling.
Yes.
But the feeling has come with through years of doing this and a strong foundation. Now, again, going back to the startup, why startups? or you can even do that in a larger setup, by the way. You just need to, like go around and ensure that you talk to multiple people, explore things, and do something on your side so that failure is okay.
Right.
So, but for me, yes, I think it worked really well,
Mm-hmm.
and it is a huge part of what I am today. And I think, like more and more companies see that coming in as a value add. There has been many leaders in my company who come and ask me, okay, what do we need to do? I mean, in this particular circumstances. So it really sensitizes you and makes you and makes you complete different personality.
Wonderful. So, Rowan, now see, you had this good fortune of stumbling upon this learning. It's practically you were there, so you did it, and you're a
Absolutely.
smart guy, so you figured it out. Now, what would somebody who doesn't have this entrepreneurial mindset like you have, what would somebody like, let's say in your team, have you curated someone who didn't have this, was in a like a MNC, and then had to bring this entrepreneurial, startup mindset into the business itself?
Oh, yes, yes. So I agree with you. Like there was definitely a stroke of luck there, but there was equally a stroke of wanting to
Hmm.
seize opportunities.
Right.
Okay, so I have mentored a lot of people, and I love mentoring young talent.
Right.
Okay, now there are a lot of folks with whom I mentor, even though they're just out of college, in my team, both here and outside too. So what I try to do with them is this, right? I mean, there is a certain part which you need to do because you're in a larger company. There is a certain process around it, and there is a goodness to it, correct? Now, whatever you do, you first try to figure out why you're doing it. Is there a way to make that better? That's number one. The number two, what I encourage them is go beyond the boundaries of your team. Talk to multiple people, correct? Because the power of association is what comes in there. The more people you talk with, now what you get in a startup is you can I got very early in my career opportunities to talk to investors.
Right.
Okay, very early in my career, understanding, okay, what is the impact, direct impact on the revenues of what I do. You can even do that in a larger company, right? You can go talk to your marketing team, your finance team, your sales team, get connected with them, get connected to your customers, both in and outside your scope of work. Right?
Right.
I mean, when I say within the company that you're in, talk to a lot of your friends who are in the industry, build that network. So the network building becomes hugely important. So as I told you, it does involve you putting in a little bit of extra effort than what you do in a startup, but it is nevertheless possible. And you have to find out who are the people in your company who subscribe to this kind of views, and
Right.
you will not find too many people, correct? So I look out for talent because I would like to mold more people who really can challenge the status quo and move ahead.
Fantastic. So you brought up another nice point just now. You said you look out for talent like this. So in an interview stage, what is the one or two things that you need to look for to find this kind of talent?
Absolutely. So in an interview stage, so I do things which are probably very different from what normal people do in an interview. I mean, I do a fair framework of the interview, but beyond that, I mean, it's largely the interaction with me and the person whom I'm interviewing.
Right.
So end of the day, what I do is, like, okay, um, what is the person's approach to life in general?
Mm-hmm.
How does the person approach problems outside his career?
Right.
You get a lot of insights from that, right? And I've asked questions which are totally non-related to the work, totally non-related to what the person would have completely prepared fully for in the interview, right? Or you pick up a topic which you know for sure the person doesn't know much, maybe just hear and say. Okay, now for example, if you're talking to an engineer who might be, like working in a certain domain, pick up a new domain and ask the person to see how the person, what would be the person's approach towards that.
Right.
First thing is, individual may directly say, no, I don't know, which is one way. Second thing is, okay, let me try. Third thing is the person makes further attempt, and you support the person along during that particular attempt. So what do you get from it? You get to see a various things. You get
Right.
to see the courage factor, you get to see the risk-taking ability factor, you get to see how the person solves problem when problems which are totally unrelated comes. You get to see the person's ability to think horizontally, not just vertically.
Right.
You get to see the person's ability to associate learnings from the current world to the to a different world. And these are things which I've personally done in my career, right? I mean, I've switched domains. I've put my hands into things where I was totally uncomfortable. You also see that is the person by nature, like comfortable putting their hands into things which they are uncomfortable with. And then you see, like what is the approach in general, the confidence with which the person talks. Again, like in a 1 hour interview, you may not get all of it. So you need to first initially make the individual comfortable before you get into all of this. But you're really trying to see, like the adaptability of the individual, the problem solving, the acceptance first before you get into problem solving. That is the mindset of the individual. And then there are a lot of things which can be taught. So I tell my entire team, like if you are are you checking a person's knowledge or are you checking a person's capability to solve a problem? No. Right? You leverage the knowledge to solve a problem, but if you're just checking a person's knowledge, that's really sad. That's not the kind of people we need always.
Right. And a lot of people look good on a CV, but they're not really good in real life.
No. Because you don't have the problem solving capability, right? You may have a fantastic CV, and there are a lot of things which you would have learned by virtue of you doing the same work repeatedly.
Right.
And that is a totally different story. That's not it. They are not your high potential or people who can change the course, correct, of your team. You may need, you'll definitely need some of that in the team because that's important to do your day-to-day work if you're in a larger company. But I would love to have people who largely will allow you to change the course of what they do by virtue of it changing the course of the company to be successful in the market.
Great. And so that's one of the factors that you look for in what we call a high potential.
High potential, yes.
So he's not a guy who's really good at his work because he's done it for the last 10 years.
No, so that is pretty easy. I mean, I think majority of the crowd can get there, correct? Yeah. So you repeatedly do the same thing for 5 years. So another thing I largely believe is almost everybody, I mean, it's not that IQ is varying so much that you. So I basically like to question the status quo of everything under the sun. So. I mean, the HR team finds very tough to work with me because they bring some standardized test and I tell them, so what? Okay, so tell me how it adds value, so for me, standardization is good to a certain extent, but it's not going to, allow you to find nuggets like this.
Yeah. Right? You're right. So, Rowan, I would classify you as a thought leader. In a lot of ways, the kind of things that you've done, the entrepreneurial spirit in you, the fact that you're not scared of doing something new or even questioning regular status quo, like even a psychometric test, which for a long time I've been saying is really not that hot. So we don't know why we are spending so much time with it.
Yeah.
So tell me one thing. Now, as a thought leader, what is the one change that you have brought about that made you feel like, whoa, this is, worth it?
Okay, so is that in me or you're talking about in general?
In you. What did you find in you that, you said, I made this contribution and I feel good about it? Yeah,
so in every place that I do, every day, that's what I go in the morning or when I start work. Now we don't go to work, right? I mean, so when I think about it, okay, the question is, okay, how can I make a difference, right? Now, I personally get a lot of satisfaction when things are put on me and when someone says, oh, we have tried 10 different times and you know what, this is really not going to work. So that's what really pushes me, it gives me a lot of extra adrenaline rush saying, okay, now this is something which I think I can solve. Right. And so I've had multiple instances like that in various places where I work. In fact, many of the places I have been specifically hired to solve this specific problem because, things have been in a mess. So how do I, how can you come and clean it up? Now, without getting into specifics, because some of it maybe, it can be quite leading. No, right. But without getting into specifics, what I've seen is that a lot of the problems are coming in because people have never questioned any assumptions around this.
Yes, you're right.
So this is the way I've been doing. This is the way my grandfather has been doing and my great-grandfather has been. So I just do it. You can correlate that to a company. This is what my seniors are doing. This is what the experts are doing. And one thing I've told in my team, and everyone knows that who listen to me, I really don't like this word called quote unquote experts. Okay, because what you're telling by virtue of it to the other side is, guys, just listen to me, don't question.
Mm-hmm. That's
Right?
true. That's true.
Yeah. So yes, you may be an expert in a certain area, but again, coming down to the nitty gritties of really what is that, the general process that I've used is question the status quo, go through it. You'll generally find the problems are narrowing down to just a few areas. The problems could be because you generally have maybe a very wrong people manning key roles. Okay. So what I mean by that is there are people with certain mindsets who just don't want to change, but they are handling very key roles and they end up being blockers. Correct. So the first step is moving them out of the roles or out of the company, whatever makes sense.
Right.
Okay. And or give them time to change. So once you unblock this, the second step is giving a great vision to your team and to the company or wherever you are part of it, right? So when you give that, people know, okay, there is something that there's something to look forward to.
Right.
The third step is really important, that you need to be ready to put your head on the line,
Mm-hmm.
right? If you are not ready to put your head on the line, like all this preaching means absolutely nothing, right? So there have been multiple instances like that, which I think, like which has given me a lot of satisfaction. And generally, I would say I can think of 3 or 4 instances, definitely top of my head, where the results were more than what even in my wildest imagination thought will be, right? It has resulted in people changing, it has resulted in things changing, uh, whether it's impacting revenues, whether it's impacting your productivity, whether it is impacting what you do, in a very different way. So one thing that I always tell my team and a lot of people who worked with me, please don't be self-limiting yourself, and by virtue of it, as leaders, limit others too.
Right.
Allow them to test their boundaries and continuously test it, right? So this few things um, has really brought about, like one of the latest things that I'm doing now is, like, don't tolerate mediocrity,
Mm-hmm.
and don't tolerate stagnation, don't be self-limiting. And there's a few of the things that we have been doing now with our team, and it's yielding a lot of things, like in terms of, so I would say the biggest impact in any of this has been working along with partners to change the mindsets.
Right.
Once the mindset changes, things literally change quite fast.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Okay. So now, so Rowan, 2 or 3 things come to mind as you were talking. A person as strong as you, as open with his articulation as you. Along the way, you would have found people finding it like, oh my God, you can't talk to Rowan. He has his own way of doing things. Did you come across that? And if so, how did you overcome it?
Yes, Ian. I mean, that definitely happens when you articulate it very strongly, or when you see that, like, okay, you have a very passionate vision about things. And so what I do is, like, with people who work with me very closely, right? I mean, I make an effort to mingle with them at different levels too, right? I see the way I test the engagement of my team is very simple. If the person who's just out of the college can approach to me with a problem, number one, can also tell me on my face, see, Rovin, I think what you're doing is wrong.
That's right.
Correct? That for me is the test of engagement, right? That's a single test that I use. And whether it's my team, it's me being receptive to criticism and feedback.
Right.
Both. I mean, it could be with ulterior motive from some others, doesn't matter. But me being receptive to that, I think, is very important, right? And that's where you lead by example. Where, so there have been different things that I've done, like I've asked people to, I constantly ask people to give me feedback and go across the board, and remind them, right? Like sometimes they hesitate, but after they get to know you, like they tend to be more open about it. And the other thing is, like, you also stand by them. So there's nothing like that. When you stand by them in the time of where they are lost, and when you put time into people, they usually gain that trust. Again, like it is like there are definitely folks whom I work with, or whom I worked with at all levels across the org, who do come and talk to me. And initially, sometimes there is a bit of a fear, yes. and that could be because of the hierarchy, which largely I don't believe in, or so because and I tell many folks my belief of leadership is like a Venn diagram. I have a role, you have a role, there's an intersection. Okay,
Right.
so what is the intersection? Intersection is where two of us have to agree. Now if we can't agree, then of course like my view has to prevail, because like I'm the leader of the organization.
Yeah.
It's as simple as that. 80% of the time you don't have, I mean, you have your role defined, I have my role defined.
Sure.
Right? So it's very, very simple. It's not an hierarchy. End of the day, it is collaboration.
Wonderful. Haven't you said that out so clearly? So I'm sure you must be telling this to your team as well. So
Yes, yes,
it
absolutely.
normally goes well, or do they come into your team knowing Rowan is going to call it out as it is? How does it work?
Yeah, so people come with various expectations. People who have been in the company, yes, that kind of, I would say, brand has already been set. People who are coming from outside, um, um, many of them have come with apprehensions. Like I can remember an instance of when I had given a talk in one of the leading management institutes to some of the students. They asked me, see, we have also worked before we started studying in some of these, some of the companies, but what you're saying is not how real life is.
Right.
Um, uh, um, so then I had to give them some suggestions on how they could possibly change.
Exactly.
But I do understand that's not the norm. Okay, so we have to make a positive impact, right? And I think what I love doing and what I would continue to love doing is being that agent of change, mentoring people, coaching people in that direction, and that's what I attempt to do where I am and in my sphere of influence.
Brilliant. And I see you as a good leader, in terms of giving people what they need to hear as well. You're not shy of that. You actually call it out very clearly. So now I'm going to ask you a question. You've worked abroad and you've worked here in India. From all your experience of all these things, can you give us two aspects of leadership that are not compromisable? Two dimensions of leadership, if you don't mind sharing.
Yeah. So I would say, like we're working with people, correct? In any relationship, what does that really matters is your trust that you have,
Right.
right? And one of the interesting things that I heard long time back during one of the uh, very good sessions that I had attended on coaching was that long ago was that when two people meet, there's an implicit trust. It's up to you to break it,
Wow. Wow.
right? It's not that you build a trust. There's an implicit trust. So that part of it, I think, is non-compromisable, right? Now, how do you get trust? So how do you break the trust? You break the trust. I mean, all of us know how trust gets broken, right? So one of the biggest ways of breaking trust is by you not being open,
Right.
right? So that is the second thing I would say. Like I mean, that's part of the first thing, not breaking trust. So I think that part of the relationship, when I say everything just goes on, right? And then like you. So with my direct reports, largely I have a very open relationship, and with whoever comes across, right? So one thing that I believe in is you will have to give direct feedback, and you'll also have to be ready to accept direct feedback, correct? And that again comes as part of trust. So I would say trust, integrity, these two things are just not compromisable.
Uncompromisable. Yeah.
Okay, so in any relationship, then of course, if you want to grow up, you'll have to remove that fear of failure from your mind, and see, like yes, like every step, success or failure is just simply a stepping stone to the next step. Doesn't matter whether it's success or failure.
Super. The way you present things also is so clear, Rowan. It's very nice to hear that. So
Thank you.
I'm going to go a little deeper. What is your biggest learning in life, and can you share that with us?
Sorry, Ian, can you just repeat it? What is your
What
biggest?
is your biggest learning in life, if you don't mind sharing it?
Yeah. So there are definitely a lot of learnings, but if you can ask me one thing, which I mean, as you increase in years of experience, correct, you realize that relationships is something which you should not compromise on nor break on, right? Companies can come and go, money can come and go, um, um, everything can come and go. But relationships, building strong relationships, is extremely important, right? And so there is one thing that I strive to do, and I always strive to do, is that is not do anything to break that, correct? So what I'm trying to say is not that you don't give feedback. You give because you're in a good relationship. You always have the, like the freedom to give feedback, positive and negative, correct? So I think that part of it, combining to what I told you earlier, previously, right? I mean, in terms of building that strong trust is very important. So for me, it's again one word. It's all about relationship building, which means a lot of it comes around it. And and let me tell you, right? I mean, people largely work for a leader. I mean, that's the reality. You
Wow.
need to build super strong leaders in companies, and the company brand, the salaries, the money all around does help in retaining people. But largely, like your leader can make or break a show. So investing in strong leaders who believe in building relationships across the board. I mean, just to amplify it further, right? I mean, why do customers buy things from you? Or why do customers continuously buy things from you? You're building a relationship. The
Right.
relationship can be through people, it can be through the products you sell, but end of the day, they always relate it back to it's some kind of a relationship that you're building. So for me, I see that is very important. Taking short-term cuts to get there usually is a huge issue, and we all have that, like inclination to take short-term goals, which is very good. And also, I think the problem is when you take short-term shortcuts,
Short,
right?
shortcuts.
Uh,
That's a new one.
yeah. So that is where the entire problems comes. And so, in nutshell, Ian, it's end of the day, it's relationships.
So a little bit of juxtaposition of these two things now. One side you're saying trust, another side you're saying honesty, sincerity, integrity, all of that. But feedback. So sometimes when you give feedback, people don't like it. Does that hamper the relationship? If so, do you do something to make a bridge before that? What is your technique in giving, cutting feedback and still maintaining the relationship?
Yeah. So it varies from person to person. If it's people whom you're working with regularly, correct? You largely know. But I think what I do a lot is, while, as I told you earlier, while I go prepare to a lot of these things, right? I mean, to the extent that I can, I don't believe that my preparation is sufficient. I mean, once I get into the meeting or a discussion, it can go any direction, right? So you sense it. See, you have to give feedbacks. You have to give it directly. If it's folks who report to you directly or work with you that closely, they know that they will hear it from you.
Right.
Okay, so that expectation is already set. Then how do you set that expectation when you start when you start that kind of a relationship? It's also right. You may have to give very strong feedback,
Mhm.
and then after that, you also go into a phase where you enable the person to come out of it. That means you're investing yourself in that individual. It's not about
Right.
throwing something at the individual and going away. So
Right.
I can tell you there have been multiple instances in my career where people have really got upset, and the first thing I tell them is there's absolutely nothing wrong in getting upset. Get upset, get over it, and come back to me when you think, like you're ready to work on it.
Right.
Okay. So end of the day, it's not about trying to sympathize with people. I think that's really wrong. But yes, I mean, as there are a lot of I think good things there in terms of best practices. Talk about the positives, then talk about like the areas of development, and these are not really negatives. These are areas of development, and I've also seen many times, like maybe the person is not able to do things just because like it could be the environment around, it could even be the people around, it could be blockers. So I think have that discussion in terms of, yes, we are seeing it. What is the let's try to explore, like maybe in that conversation or in a different, whenever the person is ready to think, why is that you got there? Or like, and that way, when they see you trying to help you, and when they see you being ready to invest in them, um, then it's usually tough for people to like kind of say no to it. And they see that, yes, there's some genuineness, right? I mean, authenticity is something which in any relationship people value, right? So yeah, so that's what. So you treat people as people. I mean, don't treat them as objects. And again, like one thing I tell my team is, statistics are great, right? Generalizations are okay, but don't use all these things, just what you read or study, and then go and because I mean, human being is a very complex being, right? I mean, the person, there are there are so many factors that comes into picture, and the permutation combination of the factors is what results in a person's response at that point of time. So be humble, be I mean, to know that you don't know everything, correct?
Right.
I mean, humility is one of the biggest virtues that I think builds any relationship both ways.
Humility. That's such a big word, and most of us, we know about it, but we don't really use it, because as a leader, sometimes you have to show who you are. So
Yes, yes.
yeah, it sometimes looks like a paradox.
Correct, correct. And
You
actually, even it's not a paradox, like that's what I've seen, like doing what you are or asking people to do certain things which they don't like is part of your role. Correct. That's where I came into this Venn diagram, and I tell people who work with me very closely, it's unfortunate, but in this particular instance, my view prevails. Right. Unfortunate, but that's what you have to do.
That's it.
Correct. Yeah. So,
And we need to call it.
but yeah, 80% of the time it's not like that. You have your clear-cut responsibilities, dude, and it takes some time for people to come back and say, to understand. Yes, like it's a mutual conversation and a discussion.
Okay, so I'm going to go a little bit off track now. Rowan, you mentioned family so well, like the kids and wife, and how much you learn from them, even parents. So you seem to be a very strongly grounded family guy. So how does this work-life balance then work with you? Because you also driven so much on the corporate side. Where is the
Absolutely. Yes.
work-life balance coming?
Yeah. So when I see, for me, like my career goal does involve my family. It's not like, like career goal is one, family is something else. No, it doesn't work that way. Correct. For you to be successful in your career, you need to have your family backing you up. Okay. For you to have a very good successful family life, you need to have your career backing you up. It works
Uh,
both ways.
both have to
So
build the other.
yeah, it's about how do you balance things out, correct? And again, over there, right? I mean, you know your priorities, correct? So there have been, like very honestly, certain roles which I could not take because of this need to balance it out. And usually, what I do is I set expectations with all my stakeholders, and one of the biggest stakeholders there, obviously, is family, correct? So there are certain things which I know I have to attend for sure. There are certain times. See, end of the day, right? One thing which I don't honestly believe in is spending quote unquote quality time. What is quality time? Quality time is when someone needs you, correct? And when that someone needs you, if you're not there, after that, how much ever time you spend, it is absolutely not quality time. Okay. So that's a priority call. Sometimes you have to take the priority call, right? I mean, in terms of something important has come up, yes, this is what I'm going to do. And it's all about setting expectations. I mean, I'm very clear with all my stakeholders. This is these are my boundaries. Yes, I'm very flexible, but certain things I will not be able to do or not be able to take at a certain point of time. It could be, like maybe with respect to certain meetings or certain few things, but you know that you also have an important role in the organization. So how do you balance it out becomes very important. Another very important thing in your career, which I think all of us underestimate, is we underestimate our potential, correct? And we also underestimate others' potential.
Wow.
Both happens. So okay, again, what do I understand my potential? Because I've been again doing the same thing in the same way the last 30 years. I think that's the only way forward. No,
Hmm.
there are always better ways of doing it. Second part about is delegating. You can delegate tons to other people. They learn, and you don't need to keep on repeating what you have been so good at the last 10, 20 years, right?
Right.
So when you do all of that, you actually have time. End of the day, I don't believe that no one has got time. And people who work with me, live with me very closely know that. What I strongly believe is end of the day, it's a priority. Everyone has got sufficient time. It's only a question of what you prioritize. And as I told you, in my entire life vision of my life mission, my family is an extremely important part. It's not a small part. So, so the way I look at it is, Ian, is this: when I'm like maybe whatever age I am, right, and thinking about my life, um, and if everything else has gone great in my career, and if I've achieved all my career goals and financial goals, but my family goals are not met, I would consider myself a failure. Right.
Wow. Wow, that's a very big one. I mean, almost goes back to Steve Jobs, on his deathbed. He said, I should have spent more time at home than in the office, and I should have been kinder to the people I worked with.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so at some stage we shouldn't come to that point where we said we could have done this better.
Yeah.
And part of this Mind Talk series is really to get other people to understand from good people like you, Rowan, that there is a better way to live. There's a better way to succeed, and we don't have to kill ourselves or we don't have to compromise our family to do it.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, it's end of the day, right? I mean, even if you take any positions in the company, there can only be a one CEO, correct? You may be better than the CEO. That's what you think,
Right.
or maybe genuinely you are, but you're not going to lose by not becoming a CEO of a company,
That's right.
correct? And but you lose a lot if you have that regret in your deathbed. That's one regret. I mean, like as you said, Steve Jobs, and that's something which struck me, and I think struck many people hearing what he had to say. And he died relatively young, unfortunately, correct? I mean, so that at whatever age you die, like the impact that you have is an all-inclusive impact, and for that you'll have to absolutely consider family as an important part. It's not a side job which you do. It is a full-time job. Have that respect and take time to spend, and you'll always find time to spend. And I also, and as I always say, don't underestimate yourself. I've consistently seen that in my life. Every time I've challenged my life, challenged myself, actually I've done better than that. So that is what gives me that great hope. Yeah, I can absolutely do that.
Wonderful. Rowan, I've got a lot of points. Somehow I feel we need to do one more interview with you some other time. But for today, I thought we'll limit it to this because already there's a lot of stuff which you have shared, and I want people to digest this and go through it. But what I like doing now of late in my Mind Talks is do a rapid fire. If I
Definitely.
ask you a question, give me a one-word answer or a one-phrase answer, and that's it. No explanations.
Okay.
Is that cool?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I'm good for it. Let's try.
Right now, Rowan.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm all good. I'm all good.
So the first question is power or position?
That's a tough one. Okay. I'll. Mm, I would say position, but I don't have an answer because I don't believe in both, honestly. But to
Okay.
give an answer, right?
Okay. Next answer. Next question. What do you believe in? You don't believe
I
in.
believe in. I believe in making an impact.
You believe in
So it's
making.
not power or position.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much for that. Wealth or contribution?
It's contribution.
That's the same. Now that's the same question in a slightly different way to you. Okay. Now work-life balance. One point that brings it about.
Prioritization.
Prioritization. That's a brilliant word, and I'm glad you repeated that. Who's your role model?
I don't have one role model. That's why I cannot give you one answer.
Top three.
Uh, there are different role models whom I've used at different instances. Um, uh,
Just top of the mind, whatever comes to you.
yeah, so that's probably the most difficult question to answer, right? In terms of who the role model is. Um, I generally look at anyone who, in various instances, who can, like who have challenged the status quo a lot. I mean, and one person, of course, in my early life was my dad, who was uh, and from whom I think lot of the values have imbibed in terms of challenging the status quo. Uh,
Fantastic.
yeah.
Fantastic. Really well done. The hardest item on your bucket list is
The hardest item on my bucket list is prioritization itself. Uh, why that is, like I'm giving more than one word. Why that is because I do invest myself completely when I do something. So that's why prioritization is not easy. But I think, like that's obviously the hardest item in my bucket list.
what's the most important thing for a happy marriage?
Open communication and trust.
Wow, excellent. As a father, the one thing you learned is
The one thing that you learned,
as a father.
I don't know everything.
Wow. Does that also help you at work then? I mean, if you.
Absolutely, absolutely. I have, I would say, two great professors of patience here.
Wow. So, Rowan, it's been a pleasure talking to you, and I'm sure we can go on for hours and hours on this. But I just want to summarize, how I see Rowan Pulikken, uh, the entrepreneur. I first thing that comes to mind is entrepreneur. Second thing that comes to my mind is a thought leader. The third thing I would say is a person with very high integrity. I worked with you now for the last few years in different ways, with your company and with the programs I've done there. But I've always found you very high integrity guy, and I can always talk to you openly. The interesting thing is, even though you're a Josephite, I connected with you without being a Josephite, and normally that's a way to connect much easier. So I want to call that out. You kept that under wraps a little bit, so much so that I was not even sure whether you were Josephite when we were talking just now. So, but I'm glad you brought that out. But overall, what I'd like to also tell people is, have the courage of your conviction to call out things. And sometimes the hard things, the bitter pill to swallow becomes so difficult to do. But you seem to have mastered that, probably because of all the platform that you have built up for being a high integrity leader, a thought leader, and a person without any personal axe to grind. So you're very inspiring as a leader, Rowan, and I think we should see more of you. And I probably do one more interview with you some other time on a lot more specific things. So as we leave this Mind Talks, I want to thank you. I want to wish you all the best, Rowan. And if there's any closing thought that you'd like to share, this is a good time.
Yeah. So thanks, Ian. I mean, I really love sharing my experiences. If it can help anyone, I mean, even if it helps one person, I think that is enough, because one person is enough to change the world. That's what I believe in. So my closing thought is very simple. Like, never give up. But at the same time, um, you need to learn from your past failures or success, but don't let it either pull you down or push you up needlessly, right? Every moment is a new beginning. Every day is new, and it is up to us to make that impact in 24 hours. Everybody gets the same amount of time, which means that's the same amount of, I would say, value deposited in your account at the beginning of a day. It's depends on what you do, what kind of impact you make, and how you deal with situations decide that really decide what value you add finally to the society and yourself.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Rowan. I'm going to thank you for being a good leader, a very warm person, and a very sincere person. But more than anything else, I would like to appreciate you for a thought leader who's going to make legacy happen as a living legacy. And I want to wish you all the best on that.
Thank you, Ian, and I think you're doing a great job by sharing this out. And thank you once again.
Thank you so much, Rowan, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you.